Brian there on WNYC. Car insurance in the United States is getting more expensive, and that's very true in our area, no question. So when Governor Kathy Hochul made lowering auto insurance premiums a centerpiece of her executive budget for New York State, it might have sounded like an easy win for affordability for working families. But it turns out to be politically not that simple. Here's Governor Hochul making her basic argument.
Some accidents really are just that. They're accidents. But others are a result of a system that's just riddled with bad actors and fraud and excessive greed that rewards criminals and illegal behavior. And that's one of the reasons why New Yorkers pay some of the highest insurance rates in the entire nation, averaging $4,000 a year, a whopping $1,500 a year higher than the national average.
So rampant insurance fraud is driving up premiums, and cracking down on it will bring costs down for everyone, says Governor Hochul. But to some, there's a catch. Reporting by Streetsblog, for example, and Streetsblog, for full disclosure, tends toward being skeptical about all things automobile, finds that the fraud epidemic that Governor Hochul is citing may be overstated. And the people pushing hardest for this lowering insurance premiums proposal happen to be Uber and others in big tech, to the tune of an $8 million promotion campaign, which raises some real questions about who this plan is actually designed to help. Or maybe Uber and the ordinary Joe and Jane car owner just have similar interests here. Joining me now is Austin C. Jefferson, Albany Bureau Chief for Streetsblog Empire State, and he's been all over the story. Austin, thanks for joining us. Welcome to WNYC.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
And listeners, share your latest car insurance bills. How much have they been going up this year or the last few years? Help us report the story by sharing your car insurance bills. 212-433-WNYC, or anything on the theory that if you're paying too much for car insurance in New York, it might be because of fraud or something else nefarious. 212-433-9692. But help us report this story, at very least, by telling us how much your car insurance bills have gone up this year or the last couple of years. 212-433-9692. Call or text. Austin, how much are rates going up?
They're not going up nearly as much as the governor suggested. They are higher, for sure. But I think this idea that there's skyrocketing rates that are distorted compared to the rest of the country, I think it's more fuel for a narrative that's based on shaky facts.
What exactly, and so we'll see what our listeners report to indicate whether it's being overstated or not. But what exactly is the governor proposing, and how does she say it helps drivers?
The governor's proposing to narrow some of the definitions within state insurance law and narrow access to pain and suffering damages for crash victims. The idea being that it will reduce the amount of fraud happening in New York, and by cutting those costs that insurance companies bear, it'll lower the cost for ratepayers.
One of the biggest changes would be to how the state would define serious injury. That designation determines whether a crash victim can pursue a larger claim in court. What's the definition now, or a larger insurance claim, I guess, as well as potentially a claim in court, which ultimately in some cases gets paid by the insurance company. So what's the definition now, and how does Governor Hochul want to revise the definition of serious injury in a car crash?
The current definition, it refers to major injuries to organs, like losing a member, a limb, serious broken bone injuries. But within the current definition, there is an allowance for injuries like TBIs and soft tissue injuries that perhaps aren't within that definition of a broken bone or major injury to an organ, but will give you that leave you unable to resume normal life for 90 out of 180 days following a crash. Now, by taking away that definition in the law, like the governor's proposing, many crash victims would be unable to seek additional compensation for injuries that in a lot of cases, leave them unable to resume normal life for the foreseeable future.
Some pushback. The governor would say that New York's tort system, where crash victims can sue for pain and suffering, is uniquely generous compared to other states, and that's what's driving up costs for everyone. Other no-fault states, Hochul uses Florida as one example, have moved to cap those payouts and see premiums drop. So why would New York be different? Sounds like it could work based on the experience of some other states.
Well, this is part of the issue with the governor's logic. You mentioned no-fault insurance. Many of the high payouts for insurance claims, they're related to no-fault insurance. And a lot of the fraud we're seeing is also tied to no-fault insurance. But these changes the governor's proposing do have nothing to do with no-fault insurance.
Maybe define no-fault insurance just by way of background.
It's a little bit of what it sounds like. You get into a car accident before anyone even decides, who's at fault for injuries or the incident itself. There's a system of giving out up to $50,000 to victims the second they make a claim. So it saves time. It reduces a backlog of claims within the insurance system, and it just makes things easier. But it can be abused.
Let's hear from some callers. A lot of people calling and texting with their car insurance rates. Jacob in Brooklyn, who works as an Uber and Lyft driver. Jacob, you're on WNYC. Hello.
Hi, what's going on, Brian? So over the past 5 years, my insurance rate has went up by at least like 25%. So I used to pay roughly around $325, and it's went up to since I renewed it last month, it went up to $410.
Thank you. So that's a starting point. Here's someone else, another cab driver, Adam in Manhattan. You're on WNYC. Hello, Adam.
Good morning, Mr. Brian. Yes, like I told your screener, I started Green Cab 2 years ago. I paid less than $4,000. Now I'm paying $7,600. It's like you want it, take it or leave it. And we have no other options, because if you're late to pay, you're going to lose your registration, your plate. It's a big mess.
Have you ever asked the insurance company why?
They don't have an answer for us. Nothing. They don't explain. I will tell you, they don't explain nothing. It's just, this is the price. If you pay late or something, like I said, is a big mess with TLC. You're going to lose the plate. It's everything is attached in the computer. If you don't pay 1 day before that, you receive a letter from the state. You're gonna lose this and lose that. So I don't know how they're gonna solve this equation. I have no idea. I follow the flock and I'm paying what they told us to pay. But it's not ethical. There is no ethics at any institution. There is nothing. Zero. People are after the money. People are after the money from the top to the bottom. It's all about the dollar. This is too much greed. Look at the insurance, healthcare insurance. Everywhere you go, there is no ethics, nothing.
Up and up, no ethics. Adam, thank you very much. We appreciate it. So, all right, we've heard from two professional drivers. Adam says he's a cab driver. I think that's Yellow Cab. The previous was an Uber and Lyft driver. Here's James in the Bronx, who I think just owns his personal car. Is that right, James? Hi, you're on WNYC.
Hi. Yes, I just own a Toyota Corolla, and I have a perfect driving record, and my insurance, I've only owned a car for about 3 years. My current insurance per year is almost $4,000. It's like $3,996. Before then, it was $3,700, and I can't remember what the first year was. But I've had a perfect driving record. I've never had a claim. I've never had an accident. Mm-hmm. I think partly one of the problems is that because I lived in Manhattan for many years, I never owned a car. And so I haven't had a long driving history in terms of being registered as a driver. I mean, as a car owner, even though I've been driving since I was 16 and a half.
But still, you're not reporting as big an increase as the two cab drivers who called. They were saying about 30% increase. If I hear you correctly, you're saying up from about 3,700 to 4,000. Do I have that right?
Correct. Yes, exactly. But it still was I was paying like $278 per month, and now I'm paying like $343, something like that.
Right.
And I'm 70 years old on a fixed income. I mean, it's really squeezing my capacity to have a car, to be perfectly honest. I mean, I really want and need a car because it's really important to get out of New York and see family. But it's really, really putting the squeeze. I mean, I pay, having a car is just a huge expense, and the insurance is one of the largest of those expenditures, because my car has no problems in terms of other than just, maintenance. But it's a huge problem. And why does the insurance go up and go up so much, especially when I have had no problems?
James, thank you. I'm going to get one more like that and then try to get your question answered by our guest. Richard in Rockland County, you're on WNYC. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Brian. Appreciate your show. I'm calling because I'm a senior driver, 66 years old, and I just noticed that my monthly bill went up 35% maybe, and I called them and wondered why, and they gave me a lot of different facts, but it was the state charge that seemed to be the most hitting. And I'm just wondering why, there's kind of this myth as you become a safer driver in later years that, that doesn't pan out. And that's disappointing to me.
Thank you very much. So back to our guest, Austin Jefferson, Albany Bureau Chief for Streetsblog Empire State. Sounds like these are big increases across the board. Austin, right? The cab drivers, 30%, still pretty big increases if they're talking about $88 a month, more, according to that caller. The other caller who went up, something like that as well, maybe not quite 30%, but still significant. Is it different? If part of your premise is that the Uber and Lyft companies and others like that have a vested interest here that may not be in the interest of the ordinary driver, it does sound like the rates are going up at a fairly similar rate of increase. What's your take?
Well, I mean, I think their interest is in their bottom line. And I think part of the evidence of that is that this proposal, it strips the ability to see compensation for crash victims. Some crash victims are drivers. Some are Lyft and Uber drivers. So, I mean, I think to say that, this is going to be a big boon to the average driver. I mean, sure, they might save a buck or two. It's not been proven how, but that's what everyone's been claiming. But should they get in a crash and find themselves in a situation where they need to seek compensation to resume a normal life, that's in jeopardy.
So what's the reason that the rates have been going up so much just in the last few years? Because that system didn't change just in the last few years, did it?
No, I mean, I think, at least from what insurance companies claim, it's a mixture of things. It's not just fraud. It's vehicle repairs, litigation, inflation, some fraud, abuse. But it's a complex variety of things that are just leading to increased costs for them. However, across the nation, these companies are making money. They're claiming reduced profits within New York State, but they're not struggling to operate necessarily. They're just passing costs on to consumers.
Sure, but you heard our callers, one of them said, he's on a fixed income, so with this increase in rates, he's struggling. So this isn't just about Uber and Lyft's what might be false claims of being struggling companies, or maybe they're not even claiming it, but they just want to make more money or save more money. We heard from, at least one individual who says this is kind of threatening his ability as a senior who lives on a fixed income to own a car. So do they have similar interests or differing interests?
Well, I think that, if these interests were the same, these companies would be pushing for insurers to offer alternatives that save money. You have pay per mile, you have behavior-based driving discounts. I mean, these are all things that could be pursued harder by the companies offering policies. And I'm sure they would save Uber and the common driver money.
So, Austin, who's on the other side? Are there big-name opponents of Hochul's proposal?
I mean, quite loudly, the New York State Trial Lawyers Association is vehemently opposed to this policy.
So you get two kind of corporate sides or in-business sides who a lot of people might find it hard to root for, right? The Uber and Lyft establishment versus the trial lawyers establishment.
Well, yes, but at the same time, I mean, these trial lawyers, they've made the point that if it is harder to successfully, win these cases where they seek compensation for crash victims, less lawyers will take on the cases. So, I mean, I think, yes, they are a large group with their own aims, but they'd like to represent these people.
Sure. What's the fraud allegation? The governor talks about fraud pushing up insurance rates. So not even the legitimate claims that we've been discussing mostly so far and how much people should be able to collect after being injured in a car crash. What's the fraud aspect here?
Well, the governor's claim is that rampant fraud is driving up costs for insurers, and that cost is being passed on to ratepayers. But we've looked at the data. Maybe there's tens of thousands of cases of suspected fraud that New York is seeing, and maybe a couple hundred of those are actually being investigated, even fewer arrests. So, I mean, I think to suggest that this is a giant issue in the way that the governor is approaching the policy changes, I think it is inaccurate.
Right. Of the 43,000 allegations of fraud lodged by multi-billion-dollar insurance companies, you write the state opened just 243 investigations and made 169 arrests. That's out of 43,000 allegations. So the closure rate on insurance fraud would be less than 0.4%. The governor's argument, though, isn't only about fraud, but also about what she calls jackpot lawsuits. And her office says that without a firm definition of serious injury, individuals without significant harms can game the system to win astronomically high awards in court. Maybe that's why it seems like there's an injury lawyer commercial on television every 10 minutes or on every other bus shelter. Here's another clip of the governor from February.
Someone could be driving drunk, without a license, cause an accident, and recover for emotional distress. Or a reckless driver who hits another car will sue for pain and suffering. And a driver who caused an accident can be entitled to not just modest payouts, but literally millions and millions of dollars from the premiums of regular policy owners, which means all of you.
Any thought about that, Austin? What's the pushback there?
Well, I think the pushback is that some of the instances that she's naming, which are valid, I think lying about the extent to which you deserve compensation after something maybe was your fault or staged, that's not something that people should support. But I mean, she mentioned driving without a license. That could mean that you're borrowing your friend's car and then get into a life-changing accident, and yet you are being lumped in with criminals. I'm not seeing the connection to how that's driving up, the amount of jackpot lawsuits in New York.
Let's see about another caller on this. Danny in Manhattan has a story about having gotten into a fender bender. Danny, you're on WNYC. Hello.
Hi. Yeah, so about 6 years ago, I was in a fender bender. I was going into the Midtown Tunnel. It was just started raining. We were slowing down. The car behind me hits me. We were going about 10 miles an hour. And then I hit the car in front of me. We all exchanged information. There was no damage on my car. And that was the end of it. Then about 6-7 months later, I get a bill and my rates went up. And I was like, why do they want? So I called the insurance company and like, oh, you were in an accident and the passenger was injured. And I said, wait, what passenger? The guy in front of me was just himself, and there was no passenger. They said the passenger had a rotator cuff injury, and we paid out $63,000. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. And they didn't even, call me. Like, if they called me, I could have said this, and then they could investigate it and, see what happened, right?
So this is an example of an exorbitant award that might be contributing to pushing up people's insurance rates, correct?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a huge award. And I don't think the guy in front of me was, part of a group that, regularly scams insurance company, but they definitely got away with that one. And the insurance company never contacted me.
Danny, interesting story. And there does seem to be a mismatch, Austin, in the data that the Division of Criminal Justice Services found, which was that 70% of suspected fraud cases involved no-fault insurance, which you were describing before, and yet the governor's proposal doesn't touch no-fault at all. So it looks like she's citing a problem in one part of the system to justify changes in a different part. Can you clarify that for us?
Yeah. So, I mean, what the governor's changes are doing, it's changing, parts of the insurance law that are related to when you can seek, a lawsuit for damages. Now, that's completely separate to no-fault insurance, which is, again, happens without even having to go through that process. You just file your claim and you explain what happened. To conflate the two, it's and in the process make changes that strip coverage from people. It's causing a real dilemma for lawmakers who are faced with this issue of deciding, do we, want to rightfully try to tamp down on fraud in New York and then bring down prices, but should that come at the expense of people that have nothing to do with the problem that we're trying to address here? No-fault insurance fraud.
We're getting a call from a lawyer who does some work in this area. So let's see what Dan in Thornwood has to say. Dan, you're on WNYC. Thanks for calling.
Hi. I just want to say that in terms of fraud, there have been some RICO cases brought by insurance companies lately against certain law firms and their affiliated orthopedic surgeons whom they claim perform unnecessary surgeries. And that will drive up a verdict if you have a service or you're actually.
Unfortunately, Dan's line is breaking up too much, so I guess we're not going to be able to get that story, but I guess we get the gist of certain kinds of fraud or fraud allegations. We're almost out of time, Austin. Is there, as Albany debates this, what else could they do to bring insurance down for drivers who are genuinely struggling with these large increases over the last few years, if not this?
I mean, I think the real solution to bring down insurance costs, at least for lawmakers to consider, is creating alternatives to traveling outside of driving. If you're living in upstate New York or in the suburbs, you're reliant on these modes of travel that lead to these insurance policies and these cases of fraud and the high cost of owning a car. If it wasn't a world and a state where you were reliant on that mode of travel, lawmakers wouldn't have to find a solution to bringing down these costs. And moreover, they wouldn't have to find a way to seek alternatives to a proposal from the governor that doesn't address the problem yet causes new ones for crash victims.
Did you just reveal Streetsblog editorial interest here? Because the basic vibe of the site is it'll be a better city and a better world if fewer people are driving and more are getting around in other ways. Do your critiques of the governor's plans or the one you're covering have a bottom line here of why make it any easier for people to use that polluting and dangerous technology by bringing down their insurance rates?
Well, I think our critique is more based in the flawed method of bringing down insurance. I mean, full disclosure, Brian, I own and drive a car. I don't understand how this would save me money, nor how it would protect me if I got in a car crash.
Austin Jefferson, Albany Bureau Chief for Streetsblog Empire State, car owner, on Governor Hochul's push to bring changes to the state's auto insurance system. We'll see how the politics of this play out over the coming weeks. Thanks, Austin.
Thanks, Brian.
Since WNYC's first broadcast in 1924, we've been dedicated to creating the kind of content we know the world needs. Since then, New York Public Radio's rigorous journalism has gone on to win a Peabody Award and a DuPont Columbia Award, among others. In addition to this award-winning reporting, your sponsorship also supports inspiring storytelling and extraordinary music that is free and accessible to all. To get in touch and find out more, visit sponsorship.wnyc.org.